So I want to start off by saying my name is Michael, and I am a map geek, as I think many of us are. Now, this is my first NACIS, so I've been hearing the term geo-dweeb. I think I can take that one also. But for me specifically, I have a love of history, and that brought up the love of maps. It was out of history that the love of maps came. So I had a wonderful experience early in my career. I was working in a map library, and the boss was telling me to clean up some of the junk drawers in the back. And in one of the junk drawers, I ran into a bunch of historic maps. And there was one from about the turn of the 16th, 17th century in England. This is one I found recently that evoked the same feelings. The pictorial landscape, the way people at that time viewed their world. And there's a certain wonder to it that over the years, as we look at the same area of Exeter on different maps in England, you start to see how it becomes more scientific, if maybe that's the way we can express it, all the way up from the 20s into the 40s. And what I think we gain in the accuracy and the depiction of what truth is, or at least as best we can represent it, I think we've lost some of the wonder. And I keep getting drawn back to that wonder of the landscape shown historically and pictorially. So, and I'm going to take a couple of minutes. 95% of you or 99% of you will know everything I'm about to show you in the next few slides. But for that one or two people in the room who don't know where to go for old maps, let me just show you some of the ones I use most of the time. But U.S. Geological Survey has a website called Topo Maps where you can look at every print they have done since the 1890s against a modern map. You can view the map here and then be able to download geo-referenced images. Our tax dollars at work, so thank you all for helping me do my maps. The U.S. Coastal Survey has their old nautical charts on here, as well as not only the finished prints, but also their hand-drawn, what they call their T-sheets or T-charts, I can't remember which one it is, where it's the sketching they use to create those later maps. And for the map of Long Island, which I'll talk about in a little bit, they actually map the landscape of the whole island, where usually they just do right along the coast. So that helped me also very much. Library of Congress has tons of maps, and I'm sorry, I meant to look up all of the figures and statistics, but that gets boring. New York Public Library has a large collection. A lot of my maps are from the mid-Atlantic states that I've worked on, but not only for the New York Public Library, but there's lots of universities, there's lots of libraries, and even like community libraries where you can find high-quality digital historic maps which you can download. David Rumsey is my go-to place when I'm having a day with nothing to do and I want to look at old maps. And again, you can download high quality for free. It's just amazing what is out there. I get more and more amazed every time I search around on the web. And if you want to see everything in one place, a good place to do that is Old Maps Online, where you can see a lot of these things and connect to other websites. So when you want an old map, hopefully that'll be handy. The problem with old maps is that they're old. They're not as scientific as the modern ones. So I have to use GIS a lot to rubber sheet, as picking those points where I can locate them on a modern map and get all my sources to fit together. So the style and what I wanted to see comes about, it's exampled well with a map I did for my brother for his wedding back in 1995. Anton, I used ink and pencil to do this, and I learned two valuable lessons. First is, if you make a map in a non-standard size, framing really gets expensive. The second thing is, back in the 90s and the technology I had available at the time, my hand-drawn maps did not reproduce well to be able to, if I wanted to, sell them or make additional copies. So that was the basis of where I started from. One, I had to go digital, and all of my maps are standard frame sizes. First off is figuring out my palette, creating reproducible, tiles to fill a landscape, creating font characters for trees, color schemes, putting that all together so that I could keep reproducing it in a listing of things, as well as what it takes to do the steps, so that every time I do the map, I do it the same way. Most of what I had to figure out, of course, is I was pushing the bounds of Illustrator, and it crashed all the time, and I had to do workarounds. So I think the notes I have for myself are more important for what to do when Illustrator doesn't work than the steps I needed to do, because I've done it a few times now. And then lastly, just learning how do you create type characters so that you can put them in. So I've had to teach myself a lot over the years in all of this. And for today, I just wanted to show you the steps I went through for creating this 1850 map of Long Island. If you want to see it in more detail, it's on panel M5 in the gallery. But to get us started, and I hope I'm being loud enough, I keep moving away from the mic. But you start with the Earth as we know it. And for me, the land-water interface, thank you, Anton, for priming me in on that with your own map, is where to get started. But in history, especially when you're talking about barrier islands and stuff like that, the modern shoreline in red, the nautical chart from 1845, and the blue, which is the best I could come up with, the coastline as it was in 1850, it's a lot of work, a lot of sources to try to get everything. I say circa 1850, but the sources aren't always the same year I'm striving for. But once I come up with the coastline, of course, doing that whole water, land polygon, everything's built off of that, so that I can then go in and, using nautical charts, build my bathymetry. And once I get past a certain point, and it varies from map to map, I go to a stylized water fill. Now, it's historic, and back in the old nautical chart days, they cared more about where the shallows were than they did with the deeper water. So it's almost a reverse blue that you see, because the darker blue is very shallow, watch your sailing ships, and then the deeper is safe to cruise, if you want to put it that way. When we move on to land, the first thing I want to do is build the drainage. So I go to the best period, scientific, or as close as I can, type of representatives for drainage. Then I go into different sources for the time period, and then I pull in buildings, settlements, roads, things like that, the cultural aspects that get overlaid onto the physical. Also pulling out, here you can see definitely the wetlands and the forested areas, and the interplay of both of those. What I do is, to help with laying on the trees, which is a very visual aspect of the final map, I put verges around houses, basically someone's yard, along the roads, along streams, so that the trees, you don't end up with a tree on top of a river or a lake, and then you have to go in by hand and move them around. And as I've taught myself more and more GIS, I have gone from having to spend dozens of hours moving trees off other objects to the point where the GIS can mostly, probably about 95% of the time, give me what I'm looking for, so that I end up with trees where the trees are supposed to be and not where they're not. So when you put it all together, you end up with a historic landscape. Now, I do try to research as best I can. Crop areas, open grasslands, fields, wetlands, things like that. So it's an artistic representation. Again, you won't use this to find exactly where the field boundaries are for any particular property if you want to do historic research. Because what I was doing, trying to make a artistic, visual beauty that you start to, oh, I'm sorry, I put type on it too, so that, people can walk up and say, oh yeah, this is my hometown. But when you pull out and you start to see how it all interplays, and of course the final map in all its extent. But what I try to do is what I call the 3 degrees of cartography. You walk up to a map, and from a distance, it's beautiful. When you move into it, you start getting information. But also there's that wonder element where all of a sudden you want to get real in close and see a little bit more. And even with other maps, I think we can all have that ability in good cartography to have the beauty, the detail, and then maybe a little something more in our maps that draw the reader in to either see more in our map or to have that interest sparked where they on their own go out and research a little bit more. Applications, my apologies. Applications, or sorry, I'm going too fast. I can do like a 1900 county map of like Montgomery, Maryland. I have 1950 map of the Chesapeake Bay area, as well as using this for contemporary. Deep Creek Lake, a lot of second homes, vacations, things like that. If you'd like to go to Deep Creek Lake every year, get a map like this, put it on the wall of your office, and on a really nasty Tuesday afternoon when you just don't want to be in the office, you can turn your chair around and escape for a few minutes. And that's what I hope to be able to bring out with all of this. So I have a few. That's Cartistic Endeavors. I'm Michael Horner. I don't know, how are we doing on time? Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we have 2 minutes for questions.
2 minutes for questions. Anybody? Are you still awake? Yes, you are. So any questions? I'm around all week. Yes, in the back.
How did you create the data? Did you trace the historic maps?
Most cases, what I'll do is I have found it takes longer to take GIS line work and, like, especially for the coastline, change it than it is to just draw it by hand first off. And hopefully I had the question in there too. So mostly this is all, once again, hand drawn. I'm not using data straight off the shelf. Anyone else? My eyes are bad, so really get your hand up high. Otherwise, I think I saved us a minute to help with our full package of presentations.
Thank you.